Hello, and welcome to Right Hearted with me, Stuart Wakefield.
Hello.
And I am literally tickled pink because I have put on a pink shirt in honor of Clare London. She is a best selling author. Claire, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for
And
inviting
the
me.
question I always ask a writer wherever I meet them is, when did you start writing?
And I bet an awful lot of them say, "Oh, I've been writing
Yeah.
since I was a child," because I think that sort of writing and
Hmm.
storytelling is always there. And people either continue at that low level or they've stopped for a while. Or, like me, I stopped after school because I didn't have
Right.
any time and I was working, and then you have a family or whatever else takes on your time. And I came back to it
Okay.
later
So,
on.
roughly how old
Um,
might you have been?
so I always have
Okay.
dabbled. I, I probably came back into it. Um, came back into publishing. It was at the end of the 1990s. I
Okay.
discovered fan fiction
Yeah.
online, which I think is the
Yeah.
entree for a lot of people. I started reading, and that sort of re-inspires you, and you think, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'd quite like to
Yeah.
write some of this as well." Fan fiction is a fantastic world because there is no expectation, there is no duty, no obligation. You can write
Yeah.
more or less what you like, and you will also get immediate response
Yeah.
if people like it. So it's fabulously self-affirming and motivating. And off I went. And once that was sort of reignited, started looking at, okay, I'm a bit tired of writing about the same characters because fan
Yeah.
fiction is based on that. It's fans who take their favorite couples and create an
Mm.
alternative life for them. I wanted to write
Okay.
original characters. Then you start thinking, oh, I loved that sharing that
Yeah.
we had in fan fiction. I'd like to share these. And so you start looking for outlets and you move into
Okay.
publishing, which I think is almost a
Yes.
different
Yeah.
job than writing, or it's an
I have a
extra
question. I have a
branch.
question about
So yeah,
writing fan fiction because I run National Novel Writing Month for my local area, which is Hertfordshire in the UK, and one of our participants writes fan fiction, and she does that for her
mm,
NaNoWriMo projects. And I was asking her, why there was a particular reason, she was writing what she was writing. I ask everybody that. And she said that she struggles in her own writing with plots and all of that and dialogue. So she wanted to work in a world that someone else had created because it was easier then for her to build her plotting and
yes.
dialogue, what she felt she was struggling with. So my question is, making that transition from fan fiction to your own fiction, what was that
Yeah,
transition like for you?
because that's a slightly sort of slant on the view,
Yeah.
and that is exactly right. You are writing about people that the
Okay.
readers already know. Even if you set them in a
Mm.
completely different world, they know the characteristics of that person. They know it's going to be
Yeah.
usually a happy ever after, or they know the big quest that they're um, premised on it. So I wrote a couple of long novels in fan fiction that I then converted to original fiction, which was very popular in the
Okay.
early 2000s when people were trying to populate the market in my genre. And so, but it was, you could not say the dark haired man anymore because people didn't know he was dark haired
Right.
or that he was surly or that he was, those sorts of things you suddenly had to step away from. I started a blog series actually on the conversion of fan fiction because
Yeah.
it's your fiction. You're perfectly entitled
Yeah.
to do what you like with it. But you're right, that little bridge over into original fiction you had to let go of, like your friend said, that support
Yeah.
in a way, and you would have to
Yes.
create your own world, your own fresh new characters. I mean, that's really exciting and far more empowering than the fact you were never allowed to write death
Of
stories and those
course.
of your
Yeah.
favorite people. Yeah, it's Now you could do
yeah,
what you like. You could kill anybody off that you wanted, because you'd
yeah.
created them in the first place. So yeah, it has its challenges, but it also, and once I think you've written, I do know original fiction writers, published authors, who still write fan
Okay,
fiction as well because they love it. And I know some that went back to it because they didn't enjoy the publishing world, and they went back to fan
mm.
fiction. So it's, and a lot of people
Yeah,
still
yeah.
read it,
And I
although
hadn't
they read
realised it.
real
It was only when
books.
50 Shades of Grey came out that I realised that had started out as Twilight fan fiction.
Yeah,
Uh,
as fan fiction. Yeah, an awful. It's, it's very basic. I mean, I wrote fan fiction for well, it's not that
okay.
obscure, but for Japanese anime,
Yes.
whereas people who are writing it on modern
Hmm.
TV series, or so that the characters are
Yeah.
contemporary, they're fresh, and so you can quite easily twist that to be a contemporary story, but
Yeah.
call them
I'd say.
something
I mean,
different.
I just. It really took me aback when she said that because I was like, you know, I hadn't even thought about it as a,
But in a way that,
oh no no
does
no.
that
But
matter?
I thought, what a wonderful way.
You
Yeah, what a
think,
wonderful
but
strategy to
yes, yeah.
to work on something else, but inside someone else's world, to work on what you thought were your weaknesses. I just it threw me, but
It was a
yes,
fantastic
yeah,
training ground. It really was, because I wrote every type of fiction, every length of fiction, every style of fiction. Some were more popular than
mm,
others, but it didn't matter. I had a chance to learn
yeah, yeah,
craft, I think, fan fiction. And there's, as I say, there's absolutely no threat of anyone saying this was rubbish. I mean, they might online, but you could ignore that. Um, but you can write as much as you like, as little as you like, when you like.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
I
conscious
think
we
it's brilliant.
haven't actually talked about what your genre is. So fill us in.
I write I write what's either called gay romance or
Okay.
MM romance, which is
Yeah.
basically romance. I write largely contemporary, and it
Yes.
involves two men in love, as opposed, with adventures and with, struggles and whatever, as opposed to a
Yeah.
man and a woman, male female. So I have written horror, paranormal, fantasy. I will have a go at almost anything. I'm really keen on, like,
Yes.
romantic comedy. I love that sort of lightness and banter. But everything I've had published, no, not everything, but almost everything, features two men as the
Right.
main
So
characters,
the first
and
book
it's there
I
that
read
the
of yours
relationship
was
is made.
Freeman. L-
Oh yes,
Love
it's one of
that
my
book. I can
favourites.
remember every lunchtime I'd go off and read it. I loved that book. And then more recent,
Yeah, then it's not like anything else I've ever written. It's
yeah.
quite
So
unusual in
then
that
I
way.
read more recently.
That
Did it?
started in fan
Okay.
fiction. The opening scene
Do you know
started
what? I'm
in
going to go
fan
back and
fiction at
read it
some
and see if
stage.
I
I wrote
can
for
work out
someone.
which fan fiction it is. Really?
No, you won't.
Oh,
You won't,
okay.
because it's very
that
obscure.
that'll save me some work.
And I used to take the characters and
Yeah,
do what I
yeah.
like with them. So,
So then more
but yes,
recently
sorry, continue.
I read a short story of yours which was I think it was called The Muse. Yeah. When I thought
Yeah,
yeah, and I thought,
I love
okay,
that one
right.
as well.
So this is very different. This is like much more light-hearted, much more comedy. I think there was a grandma character who I really loved. Uh,
There's,
yeah.
there's usually a grandma
And
character.
then
Yes.
more recently, I read The Accidental Baker, which I thought was absolutely adorable. Yeah, it was an Easter story. And then
Yeah.
next up, I'm going to read Home Sweet Home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see a definite right. So
Oh yes,
I
I
feel
love
like your
that.
center of gravity is not the hot and sweaty, oiled up torso romance. For me, it feels like I don't want to call it sweet, but as you say, it's kind of that more light, bright, sort of comedic kind of romance. Do you think that's where your kind of center of gravity is?
I think I have. grown to enjoy
Right.
writing lighter
Yeah.
fiction as time's gone on. I still do feel very strongly, though, that I usually write about younger people who are very
Yes.
in love with life and they are carried away with high
Yeah.
passion or high excitement. And so there will
Yeah.
be sex scenes, and I don't shy away from those and I enjoy
Yeah. Yeah.
writing them. But as someone told me right at the beginning, they've got to advance the plot or they're just
Yes.
gratuitous. And so that's a really important thing that I try to hold very
Yeah.
close. And so I put them in when when the characters have got
Yeah.
to that stage or it's taking the plot on. So I love the band. You see, a lot of fiction. I will keep breaking in on myself and breaking it up. But a lot of fiction isn't just about
Yeah.
the two main characters. They will have a family, they will have a job, there will be perhaps a subsidiary thriller plot or, sort of a struggle with their career or their life. That's
Yeah.
what the whole book is about. You're coming away with
Yeah.
that experience. So it's not just the sex scenes, it's or the lack of sex scenes, as we've both been accused of sometimes. It's because I have, believe it or not. It's like Accidental Baker was about a guy
Yeah.
who's a poor baker and bakes rubbish chocolates, but when they fall onto the pavement, they
Yes.
bring people together. It sounds terribly cheesy, but it gives you the chance to
Yeah.
explore different characters and pair up different men that might not have met up otherwise. And that's what was exciting was the meetup, not the what they did afterwards or
Yeah.
whether
I
it
mean,
worked
I
or
was
not.
absolutely
It's
charmed.
so yeah, I
Yeah. I
very much
was I
like
was
that.
charmed by that
Mm,
book. It was just I see. I didn't think it was twee. I
thank
just
you.
thought it was a really lovely way, as you say, to bring people together
Yeah.
who probably wouldn't have met. Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
I love to write about. It's what they call
Yes.
the meet cute. I like to bring people together. I love the tropes that say you bring opposites together or you force them together in a
Yeah.
place where they can't escape from, or they're enemies to lovers. They're all about people meeting and how the two characters bounce off each other. And I just happen to like to write under the romance umbrella so that they then go on to
Yeah.
find a way to be
Yeah.
together. I do make them suffer first quite often. And you know, and it's different levels of lightheartedness, whether it's like my romancing the books, like
Yeah.
romancing the wrong twin, romancing the ugly duckling. They're all about a slightly more light-hearted, slightly more
Yeah.
Hallmark movie
Well,
type.
yeah.
But then why
I mean,
not?
that's
Hopefully, if they give people a smile,
yes,
it's
yes, and that's
entertainment. I
exactly what.
think fiction. You are
Yeah.
exploring yourself. You are exploring helping the reader explore themselves, but it is entertainment at the end of the day, or people
Yeah.
wouldn't pick
Yeah.
up a
I mean,
book.
I it's interesting. So that the books that have kind of
And
stood
that's
out
just
for me.
smuggling.
I mean, obviously, there's that more. I struggle to call it literary, but Call Me by Your Name, Brokeback Mountain. But I found recently I'm more drawn to things like Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe, the music of what happens next. Um, the romance that I've kind of been that I loved is Kay Beresford's Merman, and I think it was called The Barbarian Pirates. Obviously, your
Mm.
stuff. I've just started reading Felice Stevens' The Ghost and Charlie Muir, which is not fast, but it's just won
Oh,
the
yes.
2021 Gay Romance Lammy Award. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's fast paced, light-hearted, sort of. Well, you can tell by the title, it's got a ghost in it. So yeah, but I'm really
Yeah.
interested in
Sorry, I was going to say my issue with all of these things being like gay romance, it's
yes,
just romance. It's just a book that's
yes,
light-hearted.
yeah,
It's a romantic comedy. It's a deep, um, sort of discovery of yourself. It's a big sort of hero's journey. It's a man against the machine. All of those things can just be presented, but
yes,
with two guys. There is, I mean, I'm not so naive as to say they're exactly the same book and you
yeah,
just swap the people around because that's not true. People write um, gay
Mhm.
romance, if you like, or whatever else it
Yeah.
covers, for a reason. It's because they like it, because they like reading it, because there is something different about the dynamic that appeals to both reader and writer.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about that. And that's another really broad range of discussion, that one. But it's so there is a reason for it in itself. But at the end of the day, it is
Yes.
still
Yes.
fiction. Else, every book, a huge number of
Yeah.
books would be
Yeah. And
exactly the same
I do
otherwise,
struggle a
and they're
little
not.
bit with putting the word gay in front of romance, because, and even, gay marriage, because, I mean, what do I have a gay mortgage and do I pay gay
Yes.
taxes? It's just like, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
I mean, you know why. You know why? It's so that Amazon and other booksellers are available, can categorize
Yes, yes.
these things. And this debate I've been involved in many times, as should it just, way back when I first
Mhm.
started writing, and there were a couple of people who wrote Age of
Okay.
Sail type novels, that sort of thing, but again with
Hmm.
gay
Yeah,
characters in them, if you like. And there was a movement by their publisher to try and just file them in
yeah,
bookshops. Remember bookshops? In with other romance or
yeah.
other historical or some sort of, and it didn't
Okay.
really work. Now, whether that's because they didn't put enough effort into it, or whether because you have, I always say, think like your reader. If you want to sell
Yeah.
books, think like your reader. And a lot of readers want to know where to
Yes.
find that
Yeah.
one thing they like. They like things that are set in Bermuda, that have people of colour,
Yeah.
that have a happy ending, that feature a television show they love. They want
Yes.
to go straight to that, and so I think, and then we get hemmed in, then we get
Yeah.
fenced in by that category and
Yes.
judged by
Yeah.
it purely,
Yeah. I
purely
mean,
by it. Yeah,
yeah,
very
and but I
difficult
mean,
to
obviously,
stand
there is
out.
that Amazon needs to know what category to sell it in, and I mean that's normally done by genre. And as you were saying, gay romance isn't necessarily a separate genre; it's a category. But genre
No,
is really the way
yes,
books are bought and sold by publishers, and by bookshops or Amazon.
romance is
Yes,
genre
yes,
fiction,
yeah.
same as
And the
crime,
gay
same
element or the
as
lesbian element or the bi
comedy
element
novels.
is a
It's
subcategory
beside,
really, or
you can pick up a Val McDermid and nowhere does it say
yeah,
gay crime. And yet her police inspector will be a woman with a wife, and
yeah,
it will just go on,
yeah.
same as any other
So
crime book.
um one thing that's always interested me, so we met back in 2010 at a writers conference. I think it was 2010, and I walked into the room.
Yeah,
Now this was writers and readers, okay, and I think there were
yeah,
65 of us and three were men.
yeah.
Okay, so I remember,
I know where this is
introducing
going.
myself,
Yeah.
and I remember standing up and said, "Hello, my name is Stuart, and I'm a real boy." And I only said it to get a laugh, but I mean, I think the majority of the people there were women, and I'm really interested. What do you think it is about the genre that women are drawn towards with two men?
Now, of course, I always would preface anything like this is the fact that more
Yes,
women
yeah,
read than men anyway,
yeah,
so your reader market is much,
yes,
much, much bigger. I think. I think,
hmm,
and again, it's a numbers game, and the
yeah,
main readers are straight women, also
yes,
gay women, or any other sort of fluid category will read
yeah,
gay romance. Gay men will read and so the only category you're missing out on
yes.
is straight men. And I live in a house with three of them, and they don't read anything. So, or not
Yes.
fiction. They do
Yeah.
read an awful lot, men. They just
Yeah.
read in a different way and in different formats and different categories. I think that MM bounced onto the scene earlier, just before
Yeah.
we'd met, I would say
Yeah.
late 2000s, because I know people who were running
Okay.
publishers back then, and they were eating up that sort of material. They had loads of readers were really keen because they wanted to see I think, that
Yeah.
different dynamic. They wanted to see two men together. They were maybe tired of the way women are
Yeah.
portrayed. But I'm talking mainly in romance
Yes.
here, although I do think it covers other categories. They were tired of seeing women as always taking a secondary role in whatever way you want
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
class it. They were, even when written by women, a lot of people loved that. A lot of people
Okay.
didn't, wanted to see
Yeah.
something else. They enjoyed seeing that. I find that I like that way that your two main characters have come from the same or a similar
Yeah.
gender basis in a way. They've been brought up in the same, so whereas men and women, there's no argument about it, do have different experiences
Yeah.
of life as they go through to adulthood. And that, I think, was really thrilling. I mean, it's a popular misconception that gay romance is read
Hmm.
solely by gay men. It's read almost entirely, as we've just said, by straight women or women. If that, again, we try very hard not to categorize our readers,
Yes.
because what does it
Quite
matter?
agree.
As long as you are a
Yeah.
reader and you're
Yeah.
enjoying reading, it doesn't really matter who you are. But I think that market was
Mm.
there, and they took to it, they embraced it. There's no denying that the thought of seeing or reading about two
Yeah.
guys in love together has a certain exciting aspect, I think,
Okay.
because people will careless, I know, and we won't get into this here, but people will carelessly throw away the comment, one guy's great, so two guys is even better. Because women
Yes.
are attracted to men, so they're going to be
Yeah.
doubly
Yeah. Yeah.
attracted
Yeah.
to two men in a
Yeah.
book, and
Uh,
they love that, because there is always the argument. I could go on for hours, but they there is the argument that women read romance because they
okay.
identify
Yeah.
with the heroine, and it
Right.
brings that into their lives, and there is an awful element of that, and so therefore, how can you identify
Right.
with a male hero?
Yeah. I
But
absolutely
you
agree.
can,
Yeah.
they're well written, and it's rather exciting that you're reading about a guy who is going
Yeah.
for what he wants in life. There's a really big there was a really big feeling, I think, that this was giving guys a chance to
Yes.
star in romances,
Yeah.
gay characters, which
Hmm.
wouldn't have been there before. So that was another big empowerment. Um, I know there are plenty of gay fiction books out there. There were, but they were in paperback. This was the beginning of, wasn't it? It was the beginning of
Yeah.
Kindle. I think Kindle came in
Yeah. And there's always been gay
2009 or
pulp,
something.
sort of
So there
seventies,
was a huge
eighties.
market. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, obviously, because men feel
Yeah.
emotions the same as women, it's pretty obvious. But this was a chance to bring that, to try
Yeah.
and redress that
I
balance.
I
I
I
think
don't know if you've ever
there
read
was a
them,
lot of that,
and I
all
think they
those
were in the
things.
eighties. There were two books by an author called Nancy Friday. One was yeah, one was
Oh,
called Men in
yes.
Love.
Give me
So,
an example.
just to dial back a little bit. So,
Yeah.
Nancy Friday, she basically asked as many people as she could get, and I think she got thousands of people to send them their sexual fantasies, and she split them up into two
Yeah.
books. So, there's Men in Love, which is all the fantasies that the men sent in, and Women on Top, which is obviously from all the women. And I read both of these books. My mum happened to have them. I don't know why. And it was really interesting. So the men's were a lot more kind of visceral, and the only sort of gay attraction fantasies were there's one that stuck out in my mind was Elvis. So this guy would like quite happily have sex with Elvis
Wow.
because he like idolized Elvis, even though he was a straight guy.
Because it was
And
Elvis.
the
Yeah.
women,
I mean,
the
who would?
women's
Yeah.
fantasies, where the women had fantasies about two men being together, the driver was that they wanted to see men be tender. And I
Yes.
found that even back in the 80s, when, I'm sure it was the 80s when I read them. I mean, I was fascinated by that concept, and that, to me, that feels like that has driven a lot of gay romance readership with women.
Yes. Because we're not talking about gay romance
Yeah,
inventing it.
yeah, yeah,
It's always been there. gay and LGBTQ
yeah,
people have always been there. They've always
yeah,
been in love, fallen in love. So you're not denying. It's just, I think, exposing it or
yes,
giving it an
yeah,
outlet,
yeah.
giving it a
And it's
voice. I don't
interesting.
know.
I feel like
I think,
it was always kind of thought of as a bit niche, but now, if you look at One Direction, obviously, teenage girls, they call that shipping. So, what might have started off with,
mm,
yeah.
well,
So
that's
you
what
might have
fandom
started off
is.
with, I
That's what
think, what they
fandom
called
is.
slash fiction, where women started writing stories about
Yeah,
um, Captain Kirk and Spock. Um,
Spock. Yeah, that's where
yeah,
the
yeah.
original
And
slash was.
then
Yeah,
now we've got shipping, which is, shipping off two members of, or
yeah.
more sometimes, of One Direction or characters from a soap. So it's always happening, and it's kind of still happening. And what I feel is it's gone from less niche to more kind of normal in the public consciousness.
I think there's been and also perhaps as a side
Okay.
issue. I want to come back to that point, but that it has been too concentrated on
Yes.
the
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
aspects of this fiction.
Yeah.
People do like sexy books. They do like to read
Hmm.
sex in their romance,
Yeah.
at all different levels. So it's always been there, but I think gay romance has suffered a bit from being
Yes.
considered only that. I think a lot of gay fiction is considered only about
Yeah.
the sexual aspect, which I think is
Yes.
a huge pity. But sex sells, as they say, and I'm not, as I say, not averse to it at all. But I think, and I do wonder, yes, I wonder what the mainstreaming of it
Yeah.
will change, because I've watched it change over those sort of like 15 years. It's
Mm.
really
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
to watch that now books with gay characters, let's not call it gay romance or whatever, are in the
Yes.
top
Yes.
10. They're being they're
Yeah.
being put into movies. They're being, I mean, no reason they shouldn't,
Well, yeah.
because
If they're
it's just,
fantastic stories, that's what
it's
people respond to.
just
Yeah.
people, stories about people. Yeah. So it's interesting to see whether it. I
Mm.
still
Mm.
consider it as niche. I still think we don't reach. One, we don't reach as many readers as we could because they don't
Okay.
know we're there. They don't know it's there, and that's been helped by a lot of sort of USA Today, New York
Yeah.
Times best-selling authors with their romance series, bringing
Hmm.
gay couples into them, like Suzanne Brotman and J.R. Ward and such like. But also, I think there's still people want to identify with how they are, and it's the numbers game. They are heterosexual. They want to see someone who comes from their background, or a
Yeah.
background they wish they'd come from, and so that's what they choose. So it's been, but it's expanding. It's of interest. It's another area of
Yeah.
fiction that's open
So some people
to
are,
all.
selling considerable amount of books and have a huge following. What's your view on writing to market versus, I wouldn't say writing for yourself, but writing the stories that speak to you?
Yeah, I think this goes right back to that sort of whether you write for
Yeah.
writing's sake because you love it or you have to because you need to get the stories out, or whether you then that extra branch, whether you want to go on and publish. And that's, I think, is when you stop or should stop and think, why am I
Yeah.
doing this? Do I want fame and fortune? Because, like any of the creative disciplines, there's only 2% of people
Yeah.
ever make it big. There's thousands of jobbing actors and artists and whatever. So, and they do say 90% of authors are earn below the
Right. Yeah.
breadline. So it's not a route, particularly nowadays when there's so many millions of books available. So you look at why, and if you want to go on and you want to make a business out of it, then you have to shift your mind into, do I write the book of my heart and hope it gets picked up for
Yeah.
the Booker Prize? Or, because unfortunately, a lot of Booker Prize books would not be picked up in genre
Yes.
fiction by
Yeah.
genre
Yeah.
fiction readers. And go back to, it's a numbers game. There are millions of genre fiction readers. So if you wanted to make a commercial success and an ongoing, and a lot of people, you're right, a lot of them sell a lot. They write for many, many years and have a good career out of it and support family and love it and have a huge community of fans. But then you have to appeal to those fans. You have to write something that they will continue to
Yes.
want to pick up. I mean, I have writers that I follow, and they could write anything, and I'd read it because
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
love their style. They could, write a Chris Packet. I wouldn't care. It's fabulous, but most people follow
Yeah.
characteristics, tropes of fiction. It's awful, but it's like Amazon. You like this, therefore
Yes.
you might like this. So it's sort of
Yeah.
following on
Yeah.
also boards,
But I mean,
as they call
I
them.
find tropes
And so
quite comforting though, because I kind
do
of
you?
know what I'm
Yeah.
getting. I was in Tesco the other day and I was looking at all of the just like regular books, and on the bottom shelf it was all the category romance. So it was all like the billionaire romances and the cowboy romances, and
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, like if I was in the mood for enemies to lovers, or
Yeah.
uh, is it the cabin thing where they kind of shut false proximity?
Forced
Um,
proximity. Yeah.
yeah, if that was what I was in the mood for, I'd want to be able to find that.
So what's your favourite trope?
Mine, do you know what mine is? Kind of culture clash. So my latest book is about two guys who fall in love during the
Yeah.
making of a reality TV show, and um, one is a tailor and one is a fashion designer. Um, one's from
Yeah.
Newcastle, one's from London. One is from a relatively normal background. One is like super rich. Um, so I kind of, public school versus comprehensive school. I kind of like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
collision of cultures and backgrounds and how people kind of feel their way around that. And obviously the spin-off books I've got from that. Um, one, I wouldn't call it's like a May to December, but one of the guys is kind of a little bit older and he's struggling with some fears about sexual inadequacy, whereas the younger guy who's the model is, virile and all that kind of stuff. So I like that.
Yeah.
That
Confident. Yeah.
how do those people
Yeah.
like and end up together and get through their own insecurities and stuff? And that's what I really like about characters. And earlier when you said about um, people having backgrounds and lives and families and stuff. When I work with my book coaching clients
Mm,
and we talk about info dumping, if they're doing pages and pages of background, I'm like,
mm.
listen, everything in your book is about background because somebody's background affects the way they react to everything. So you can pepper that background right the way through
Yeah.
your novel so that the reader understands why that character is working like that. You don't need 4 pages of background right at the beginning of your novel because it slows everything down. But
In a way, you're not
yes,
telling the
yes,
story, is what I often think. Is you are
yeah,
opening it to view, which is easily said, and you do have to. You do have
yes,
to
yeah, yeah,
tell some
yeah,
things along the way, but you're picking up these characters at a certain point in time and
yeah,
taking them on a certain journey, and you want the
yes,
reader coming with you as opposed to, oh, this
yeah,
is what
yeah.
happened
And
last week.
with everything that
And
happened,
yeah, because it
yes, and
engages them
everything that happens.
emotionally.
Okay, so in your life, in our day to day lives, excuse me, everything that happens and the way we react to it, and my view is readers want to see your character react to something and then make a decision. All of that reaction and that decision making is based on everything that's happened in their life up to that point. So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, as writers, it is on us to create those rich characters who have lived because that's what people can
Yeah.
identify with. And even if they haven't been in that situation themselves, they can put themselves in that person's shoes, as it were, whether they be flats or high heels, and sort of understand why that person is doing those things.
I think you have to create not
Yeah, yeah,
reality necessarily. So you don't talk about
yeah,
them walking to the shops and what they bought. As Elmore Leonard said, didn't he? He left out
yeah,
the bits that readers skip. So I mean, I just love that. It's probably misquoted, but you are
Yes.
giving plausibility.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Nobody thinks you're necessarily going to bump into someone and suddenly they're a fated mate and everything falls into place and you win the lottery. But it'd be nice to
Yeah.
think that it could happen
Yeah.
and that it's possible. And I think that story, that trope that you, which is actually one of my favourites as well, the opposites attract, the
Yeah.
town mouse, country
Yeah.
mouse. I just love that. I did that in Romancing the Ugly Duckling
Yes.
because that's what it was all about. A London fashion designer goes to spruce up a grumpy old Scottish crofter. Well, he's young, but and it, obviously we all know they're going to
Yeah.
slowly wear each other down. But I think that's so much scope, that's
Mm.
so much material to tell a
Yeah.
good, entertaining story. Whereas if you've got two people, much the same upbringing, they think the same way about the world, which is probably
Yeah.
how it happens in real life. You are compatible with someone. You've both got the same core values, which is what's important. But no, we like to see people fighting it,
Yeah.
struggling against it, discovering something about themselves they didn't. I mean, when I write a book, one of my theories is that by the end of it,
Yes.
both of them should have
Absolutely.
been changed for
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
the other person. And that's important to me. So one of them doesn't stand still while the other one bounces off them.
Yeah.
They gradually mesh and find a better
Yeah.
way forward together, which is what it's all about, relationships. So, and I just happen to like writing about two guys doing that. For me, largely as well, I think because a lot of guys are not as encouraged or experienced in expressing themselves. So I really like to be able to do that for them
Yeah.
in a book because
Well, I mean, we've
you
had
know
this huge push on, mental health for men, men not being able to open up. And again, coming
yeah.
back to that Nancy Friday book, Women on Top, again, the attraction is to see men open up and be tender and be vulnerable. And I don't want to see
Mm.
be more like women, but, for women to see those things that they see in themselves and in their sort of, girlfriends.
Well, yeah, nobody's wholly
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
one thing or the other, though, are they? We're all sort of on a spectrum. I mean, most of us are pretty
Mm.
in our bracket and happily so, but that doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable.
Yes.
Well, of course, men are vulnerable. They're just possibly taught or
Yeah.
encouraged
Yeah.
not to show it, but they don't have to go out and kill mammoths anymore. So, so they have to sort of find
Yes.
a newer way and to be able to blend more. It doesn't make
Yeah.
them
Yeah. And
like a woman. Just like a
yeah.
woman being assertive. But that's another discussion. But a woman being assertive is not being like a man. She's
Yes. And
just
she gets called
showing
bossy and a bitch.
assertiveness.
Whereas a man,
But
yes.
she gets called
Yes.
aggressive.
Whereas a guy
Yes.
is like, you know,
And so it's been yes, I think it's been a little bit the gay romance world has been a little bit of a window into changing
yes.
habits. I mean, I was thrilled sort of mid late 2010s, so 2017, 18. I wrote my first proposal scene
Oh,
for two guys. I
yeah.
had never written that
Yeah.
in my life. I
Yeah.
mean, there were civil partnerships and I've been to many, but it was just lovely to be able to do that. And now we write regularly about marriages and weddings and adopting children,
Yeah.
and
And how lovely
it's
for
great.
us to be able to do that. My goddaughter, she's
Yeah.
17, yeah, 17. And she sent me something on Instagram about
Mm.
AIDS. And she's like, oh my God, I've been reading about AIDS and stuff. And I wrote back to her and I said, you do realize I was in my teens in the 80s and I had to watch
Yes.
the ads, that horrible ad of the gravestone
The
falling down
stone.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think she had appreciated, like that, people of
No.
our age, we lived through that. And
The terrific amount has happened
yeah,
in our lifetime in that whole
yeah,
area of relationships. I mean, the pill
yes,
became freely
yeah,
available. There was AIDS. There was a sort of other
yeah, yeah,
LGBTQ issues. There's Black Lives Matter. There's all
mm,
sorts of things are happening now. And as you say, it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
within a
I used to be
generation.
the chair of our gay and lesbian group at Ford Motor Company when I worked there. I was chair for about 3 years, and there was lots of concerns. This is sort of about 2013, sort of that time, and our membership numbers started to dwindle, and people were getting really antsy about it in the committee. And my view was that that was a good thing because the members in the group were flocking together because they were the only other people that they had. And what I noticed is over that time, they
Yeah,
didn't need us for that social interaction because becoming gay, I know there's that whole thing about, being absorbed into heterosexuality, but those people didn't need that because they were getting it outside the office.
it's a
Yes,
difficult
yes,
balance, though, isn't it? It's a difficult balance between the. I mean, there's no denying that human nature, and this opens up a whole different debate. But humans
yes,
do seek their own. They do seek the comfort of
absolutely.
familiarity, their
Yeah,
own. We are tribal. We do look to, and we do have. I don't
mm,
think prejudice is a
yeah,
bad word. You see, I think
yeah,
it's a descriptive word. It's just how you then
yes,
express it externally, discriminatorily. But we do have prejudice, and so it is difficult. You want to be amongst people that
yeah,
understand you and get you from the get go. You
yeah,
don't have to explain anything else, or and yet also you want to be part of the bigger group. It
yeah.
is a difficult
I
one
did
to.
I did read somewhere that the brain needs stereotypes. It needs to be able to file things to a degree, otherwise it just can't cope.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Because if you had to approach every single new person as a
yeah,
completely
yeah.
clean slate,
So,
yeah,
what do you think the
wow.
future of gay romance or romance
Yes,
is
sorry,
going to
because
go?
I don't think I even answered the writing to market, except to say that you possibly should if you wanted to make any money. Um, I'm actually this year doing a
Okay,
project under a different pen name where I am seeking to
okay,
write to market because I wanted to see what the world today in 2021
yeah,
was like from when I started. And so I didn't want the expectations of the Clare London pen name. And so I started completely afresh. I had to run two Facebook groups, two, sort of emails, and it's been a bit of a struggle. And now everybody should know,
right,
it's not like it's a secret. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone, but I took a very particular trope that I like to read and that I wanted to write, and it's
okay,
rent boy romance because I'm a big one about
yeah,
being very sex positive and that people I admit it's fairly sanitized in my books.
right,
They're not on street corners. They're all a community together in a hotel around the back of Earl's Court. But it's that sex positivity, but also looking for a relationship and
yeah,
romance. And so each of the guys I'm taking each time and finding them a happy pairing, which gives me lots of scope with the opposites
yes,
attract and
yes.
such like. You hopefully you will like
Well, I'm
this. I'll
definitely going
send
to
you
be
some
buying
copies.
*Romancing the Ugly Duckling*.
And
I mean,
so,
that's going right on the list.
oh yeah, I think you'll love that one. I think you'll love that one. And so I'm
Okay,
watching it through to see I'm taking certain market decisions like publishing
okay,
only through Amazon, whereas a
hmm,
lot of my other books are wide, available at all sorts of bookstores in different formats. To see whether that does it. I'm following the marketing practices that I see happening nowadays, the way
yeah,
people interact on Facebook groups, the sort of
okay,
advertising they do, the sort of marketing. It's exhausting. Just to see whether I'm branding it in a certain
hmm,
way, the covers, in the thought that Stella Shaw, if anybody
okay,
wants to follow it up and follows my liking for the genre, and to see whether, to see how that goes. It's been interesting. It's a slow start, but again, it's very much
okay,
trope led because
yeah,
that is
yeah,
all that they're about. There is plot in each one, but it's not some major thriller dashing
yeah,
across
yeah.
the world business. I'm sort of a bit known for writing in three rooms, and that's it. Really. So there's only three rooms, but it's all about the characters,
Yeah.
and let's see how that goes. I actually just finished number 4 yesterday, and it's gone off to the
Very
editors.
good.
It's
Okay.
wholly self-published because I've worked with publishers in the past, but also started going self-publishing about
Yeah.
2013, when I felt I
Yeah.
had the confidence to do that. And that's been very much more rewarding, much more hard work,
Yeah, but
much
I mean,
more
I'm
rewarding.
hearing from the traditionally published authors that I know that they're having to do that work as well, like more and more and more.
Yes. I think there's only, again, it's only the top sort of 2% who are given huge marketing budget. Well, the fact is they're
Yes.
given a huge advance. So it doesn't really matter how many of
Yeah.
the Ruddy books they sell
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
keep that advance. Whereas for everybody else, it's each incremental
Yeah.
as you sell a book. So the percentage that you keep becomes much more important because I'm also an accountant. It's seeping through there. So it's, yeah, they don't. Otherwise, you rise or fall by
Yeah.
your publisher. Now, I started with a couple of publishers because
Mm.
it was exposure. Because people would go to that publisher, readers would go there.
Yeah.
What are the new releases?
Hmm.
So they'd find you. Nowadays, you can. I mean, I always say that's the first
Yeah.
important thing, that
Yeah.
people know you're there. Readers
So,
need to
what
know
do you
you're
think
there.
about?
Then they need to pick up your book. Then they need to tell their friends. So, oh, it's easy, really.
what do you
It's
think about?
easy.
What do you think about the kind
So
of the
yes,
rise of self-publishing? Because I won't go into specifics, but I know there's been some problems with what I thought was like the main gay romance seller. So I've seen a lot of rights reverting back or coming back to authors who've then gone on to
mm,
self-publish those just to kind of keep them on the virtual shelf. Do you think there's much of a any stigma or quality concerns around self-published versus traditionally published in that genre?
yes. Oh, sorry. You want more? No, because I actually also help curate a Facebook group for indie
Okay.
authors, we call ourselves, and that
Yeah.
could be hybrid. You could be with a publisher and
Okay.
also self-publishing. A lot of publishers only take, say, print rights, so you've got the ebook rights to. So it
Yeah.
covers all sorts. I think there's still a stigma because the low barrier to entry of self-publishing means you do get
Yeah.
a lot of rubbish. I'm sorry. You do get, and when you're going in and looking at a book on Amazon or wherever, you can't tell which one's going to be good and which
Yeah.
one's going to be bad. Crafted,
Sure.
well or
Yeah.
bad,
Yeah.
actually. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you hit enough of
Mm,
those tropes. A lot of readers don't notice if you've got a comma
yeah.
splice. Sorry, authors, but they don't care. But it's, I know, but that's no excuse for not doing the best that you can. So I think it is still viewed, there's still a huge kudos in being with a publisher. But that goes back to my point
Yeah.
about why are you doing it? You might not be making as much money. I think was almost, you won't, because your agent's taking
Yes.
a slice, your publisher's taking a slice. There's not a lot left. When you're out of this season's new
Yeah.
releases, you're out. You're very often tied into several books that you don't always have control
Yes.
over what they do
Yeah.
with them, where they sell them, what cover they put on them, etc., etc. So that's what. But a lot of people like that because they can say I'm published
Yes.
by
Yeah. And
XX,
also, when you meet somebody at a party,
and
when you meet
that's
somebody
fair
at a
enough.
party and you say, oh,
Yes, yes,
what do you do? Because God forbid we only be defined by, what our backstory is. We're defined by the job that we have. So you say,
yeah.
I'm a
No,
writer.
no,
My
I do.
stammer's
Yeah.
bad today. Sorry. Um, and they say, well, yeah, but are you traditionally published? And you're like, oh, here we go. Oh, I
Ah,
do
I don't
all the
get
time.
that. I don't get that. I get, are
Oh,
you on Amazon?
okay. That's an interesting. Yeah.
Or how many
Okay.
books have you written? And then you say, well, I've got about a dozen novels and 20
Yeah.
novellas. And they're going, oh my God. So, and that was always when I talk about why, my big one was being
Yes.
on Amazon. That's what seemed to be the most important. And I was so thrilled when a book was there. And then, of course, you think, well, what
yeah,
next? You can't
yeah.
just stop there. It's not the first time that matters, I always say. It's the
Do
times
you know
after
what? You
that
gave me
you've
some
got to
advice, and
worry
I've never
about.
ever forgotten it. I asked you about marketing, and you said to me, "The best marketing you can do, Stuart, is write another book."
Because there's nothing worse than appearing in a shower of fireworks and people say, oh, yeah, I really quite like
Yeah.
that. What else have you got? It's really difficult, though, because you want to put
Yes.
what you've got, you want out there, but it's not
Yeah.
got, you won't get longevity, you won't get
Yeah.
a continuing fan. That Accidental Baker book that I wrote, and to my shame, I was going to write books about all of the
Okay.
couples, the
Yeah.
4 couples that appear in it. And I got the first one out there. And then the muse left me. I just
Yeah. Yeah.
lost the energy or whatever. And occasionally someone will write and say, when are you going to do the others? So it's, and Clare London, because I suffered with that publisher that you
Okay. I didn't
obliquely
want to call them
referred
out
to.
because it's
Um,
yeah.
no, don't know, fair enough. But well, I don't see why not, because anyway, stopped paying royalties, let's put it that way. So most of us have taken
Yes.
our books back, a lot of us. And it's been quite difficult to get them back out. You think, oh, just stick a new cover on and throw it out.
Mm.
It's not that easy. I've got books that were published in 2009, 2010. The market has changed, so it circles round to the
Yeah.
writing to market. I mean, I may call on you to help see what could be done with perhaps my
Right.
most successful title, but appears dated, not just in the stuff that's in the book, the item, but in the attitude, possibly, and in
Mm.
some of it. I don't know. I enjoyed it a lot. People do still ask, but
Yeah.
something's holding me
So
back from pushing it out there. You wrote in a certain way then.
yeah.
I suppose we were writing
Are
to
you
market then as well,
are you
just a different
tempted to go
market.
back and rework that book then?
Yeah. A couple will never see the light
Okay.
of day again because the craft to me was so
Right.
poor.
Yeah.
It hurts. And people say, oh, just go in and re-edit. Oh, no, 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 no. Some of them should, I think,
Yeah.
not come out again. But a couple I've been pleased with. Um, there are specific issues like that publisher we're talking about
Yeah.
were based in the US. So in those days, they didn't like British
Oh,
grammar and
having to call pants
vocabulary, and
instead of
I set
trousers.
everything in some unspecified
Yeah.
US state, and so I would want to go
Okay.
in and rejig that to
Yes.
Britishize it, bring it
Thank
back
you.
to its roots. So that would take work, and after a while, I mean, a lot of the people reissuing stuff, it is their only
Right.
stuff, and so they were
Yeah.
really caught on the hop, and they needed to get that
Mm.
back out there quickly because
Yeah.
their income just dried up. I was lucky in that I had, in the meantime, gone on to self-publishing and had a portfolio there as well. Um, and so
Right.
there wasn't the pressure on me. And gradually, it's coming out. I just republished How
Okay.
the Other Half Lives, which is a romantic comedy novella, and that I think has stood the
Do you
test of time.
ever feel under pressure to kind of churn out books? Because you were saying you had a dozen novels. I'm assuming that since
Mm.
2007. Did you say you were?
Well, yeah, I've ground to a halt on that
Okay.
market to some
So
extent.
other novellas.
Um, And there are people who are
Yeah.
chucking them out every 2 months. I mean, the Stella Shaw books I had been
Okay.
trying, they're fairly short, if you like, though
Yeah.
that's a relative term, isn't it? But they're between 40
Okay.
and 50,000 words. So I
Yeah.
think that's still a sizable read. And I've been trying to do those
Right.
every couple of months. Well, that's just gone by the wayside with COVID and various, real life comes. And, and I'm thinking, this
Yeah.
pressure, I'm only putting it on
Yeah.
myself. Nobody's telling me I have to do this. So I'm probably going to ease off on number
Yeah.
5 to be a 3 monthly. But there is a pressure
Mm.
on that, and you notice it in your sales, don't you? And the interest people take in you. I'm not saying that you're arrogant or an author is arrogant enough to expect people to
Yes.
always be thinking of them, but you'll pop back on to say, and
Yeah.
they'll go, "Oh, where have you been?" So, and every book you write directs people back to your backlist.
Yes.
So it's got a snowball effect. It's worth doing for that reason alone. You don't necessarily have to write in
True.
series, but that is very popular
Yes.
nowadays
Yeah.
as well. So if you blast out number 3 and everyone goes, oh, that looks interesting, they'll go back and buy number 1
Yes.
and 2. And I see that happen with the romancing books. There are 4 of them. They're not related. It's not a series. They're all just a sort of a romantic comedy. Opposites or enemies attract, but people are buying them in
Yes.
chunks. They go in
Yeah.
and they buy
Yeah.
all 4 as opposed to just one when I've promoted one. And so that's why the writing the next book is so, plus it keeps you fresh as a
Yeah.
writer. It
Yeah.
keeps
And it
you
does help you to
rolling.
kind of develop that
Unless
craft.
it
Yeah.
was just that one book. Yeah, a lot of people do just write
Yeah.
that one book
So
and they're happy with that.
your novellas, in the nicest possible way for you, were they kind of fillers it to keep it looking like you were constantly having new releases, sort of in between novels, or
Well, I will admit
yeah,
I do that. I do that. I will either re-release an old thing or I'll write a shorter story, or sometimes just so that people know I haven't died, really. So it's, you know, I am still a name in the market. But also, I found over time, I found my sweet spot
okay,
for length
right,
of a book. About
okay, right,
40,000 for me. Now, if you look at traditional publishing, that's
well,
amuse
yeah,
bouche.
mine's
It's just
mine's
a short story. But
83,000 words.
sure, yeah, I write
Okay,
between 40 and 60 because that suits me. I find that the plots I have fit there. I have
yes.
no more to
Do you
say
know?
on the
I think
story.
that's really important because I'm a true believer that your book only needs to be as long as it needs to tell the story,
Yes, yeah.
and just throwing subplots at it.
I have a joke running with my,
Sorry.
yeah, my writing group, and a little joke running that we say car keys because it's people who then go, and then he picked up the car keys and he walked to the door and he opened the door and he went down the front path and he got in the car, and we're thinking, no, 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 move on, move on, tell me what's really happening, what he's really feeling. So it's a lot of, yeah,
Yeah,
you find
yeah,
yourself padding. I would find myself padding or going drifting off onto a subplot
yes,
or a sub
yes,
pairing, something which is interesting. I mean, my grannies are a case in point. I love writing my grannies. They're always
yeah,
eccentric. They're always very wise in their strange way. You've got to be ever so careful they just don't take over. It's like writing kids and pets.
yeah,
They'll
yeah.
take over,
I
and
mean,
that's what
I'm
people
a huge
remember.
lover
Or
of.
in a way, you want readers to say, "Oh, what happened to him? What's his story? Will you do that next?" But in the other way, you want them to say, this one was
Yeah,
fabulous on
yeah,
its
and I
own.
mean, certainly my series, I'm doing like spin-offs, but coming back to what you were saying about those secondary characters who become quite, who come to the foreground. I think again, I mean, I think part of it is that that rich life. You are going to have those relatives that give you advice that are a bit eccentric, but also I think
Yes.
that's quite a British
Yeah.
thing because I grew up reading Jilly Cooper, and I am and was obsessed with Victoria
Yes.
Wood. So I have, my I can keep banging on
It's
about
a
my latest
cast of
book, but
thousands, isn't it? Yeah.
it's got that light-hearted Jilly Cooper meets Victoria Woods sort of
Mm.
feeling to it.
I mean, I love that. I love
Yeah.
banter. I mean, I'd write almost entirely dialogue if I had my way,
Yes.
really.
Yes.
That's why when cover artists say, what does he look like? I'll say, I've got no idea at all, but I can tell you how he speaks. So, um, yes, I think you're right. I think it is quite British. I don't think we write
Right. Yeah.
melodrama
Yeah.
so much, or not in romance. We don't have the absolute highs of angst and euphoria. We have but we have a lovely turn of phrase, and we'll just get right to the nub of
Yes.
things, right to the
Yeah.
heart. But yes, it is a style. You're right.
Do you once you're what you're
But it's cast 1,000, Julie. Yeah.
oh
So,
well, you know what? I had a big, not a falling out, but I was coaching, doing a developmental edit with an author, and she had, I think it was 42 characters, and
yeah.
anyway, we didn't have it out. We had an energetic debate about this is her first novel. Could she really get away with that many characters? Anyway, it was going backwards and forwards, and the new Julie Cooper book had come out, and it still had the plastic seal on it in my house. And obviously, Julie Cooper has so many characters; she has to have a
Yeah.
like a bibliography or something, whatever you call it, a cast list. And anyway,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. A map.
counted them,
Yeah.
and it was about 50 or 60 at that time. Anyway, I said, look, Julie Cooper's, you know, got this many characters, but she's been writing the Rutger Chronicles for like 10, 15 years. I don't think you should do that with
Yeah.
your first book. I had to laugh because my book's got 38 characters. I was like,
That's
physician,
it.
heal thyself.
You see, I think when, particularly with your first book, you've got all these
Yeah,
ideas and all these
yeah,
people, and so you want to share them
yes,
all. You want, it's a sort of almost a, sometimes, they talk about kill
yeah,
your
yeah,
darlings when you're writing, chop out stuff that is extraneous or not contributing, but you don't
mm,
lose it forever. You could use it later. I often think, don't give it all up
mm,
in one
mm,
book. With all those people, she could have 2 to 3
yes,
books out of that,
yes,
if not more, with just the
yeah,
thread running through. It's the sort of the Midsummer Murders
mm-hmm,
approach, isn't it? You just have your core people plotting along and other people bounce off. So, but I think there's an awful desire to get all that out there, and that's great, but that's
mm,
part of the learning that then you'll say, oh, I'm exhausted, or I haven't got anything to
yeah.
talk about in another book.
You,
It's, and also I think readers get confused. I mean, good God, I've had many a review where they've even got the names wrong of the 2 main
I did,
lovers. So I mean, I'm not being cruel, but it means that because they're
yes,
reading an awful lot, these people, they don't want
yes,
lots and lots of people. They want to be able to home in on the,
yeah,
the essence of the story, and that usually
yeah.
means just 2 characters. If
I
a
had
few
this, I
more,
had this
have a few
wonderful
more.
review, and I had to laugh. Um, I can't remember if it was like 2 or 3 stars, but they said like I think this is a really terrible way to start a series. I didn't really understand what it was all about. I had no background on who the characters were, and they'd read the second book in the series instead of the first one, and I had
Oh,
to
bless.
chuckle.
Yeah,
And I felt like, should I
yeah.
go back to them and give them like a free copy of the first one because they've completely misunderstood sort of where they are. But yeah, I mean, that's we can't control people getting what we're writing. Do you
No,
yeah
that's a
do you
very good
think there
point. Yeah.
is so I'm conscious that in MM romance, the huge readership of women, most of them are in the US. I don't know if I can make that generalization. Do you find that there's a different attitude
Yes, you can.
from them with you writing about books set in the UK than there might be from the UK readers? Okay.
I do. I mean, this is only me, and I mean, a lot of them love it. They love
Yes.
a different place. They love a different type of person, maybe, but they only like it to a certain
Hmm.
stage and over. Maybe because I originally wrote Americanized, or because it's just the way I write. I do
Okay.
ease out now. I don't come in with a lot of
Right.
very British phrases. I'm determined I'm not giving up pants and
Good.
trousers and that sort of thing. There are certain words I will not use. But I think language anyway has absorbed an
Yes.
awful lot, hasn't it? We've probably absorbed loads
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Americanisms. I know we have over the years anyway.
Hmm.
Let's not be precious about this. I like to keep the
Yes.
English character, maybe, but I'm quite happy to smooth the narrative
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
and make it easy. No, not easier. That implies that people can't cope, which is not true at all. But you don't want
Yes.
anybody to be
Yes.
jarred when they read your book. You don't want them to have to go away like I've done with some illustrious crime writers, and
Yes.
have to look up
Yeah.
words. It's not
Yeah.
many words I have to look up, but I do. I do. So you just want either to gather the context, or if it's easier to use a more familiar word,
Yeah.
what am I giving
Yeah.
up? Nothing really. I'm not writing for the
Mm.
joy of the prose, perhaps. I'm
Yeah.
writing for telling the story.
I'm reading
So,
an award-winning
yeah.
romance at the moment, and I think it was like
Mm,
second chapter. They used a phrase. He hammered on the door with a closed fist, and it stopped me in my tracks
yeah.
because my first reaction was,
Uh,
"Is there any other type of fist?"
of
And
it.
I,
Yes.
yeah,
That's in the
yeah,
editing, that is,
but
Stuart.
again,
That's in the
like as you
editing.
say, it jarred me, and I stopped reading, and then I go off and I start googling, is there such a thing as a closed fist? And I didn't find it, an open fist. And in the end, somebody on Facebook, I put it on Facebook, and I said, like, help me. And somebody said, oh no, in martial arts there is this
Yeah.
term about an open fist, and it's all to do with where your thumb
Oh.
sits. But if that writer had just used the
Oh.
phrase hammered on the
Oh,
door
no.
with his fist, I would have been quite happy and kept reading.
You've probably been all right with just
Well,
hammered on the
yeah,
door. I mean, there are things that you
yes,
learn over the years,
yeah,
perhaps not just from reading, because reading is really important if you want to write. People don't always realize that, but also attending craft things, or
yeah,
listening to people
yeah,
talking about craft things, or going
mm,
through the edit process with a good editor. And that you do learn better ways of describing things. It might not have been your first way, it might not be
mm,
the prettiest way, but the things that jar, yeah, the things that people, and I'm sorry, people will pick up, because
yeah,
once it's jarred, that's it. They'll see it every time it comes up. Because we all know. I mean, I read like that now. If a phrase
yeah.
comes up that's odd, it leaps
I
out,
do
hits me
think
on the
being a
nose.
writer ruins
So
reading.
yeah,
Well, I mean, not
I'm not,
ruin it,
I'm
but
not sure about
yeah, yeah,
ruining. No, I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean, because I, I don't edit anything. It's not particularly my skill set. I beta read, which is where I will read a friend's manuscript and give support on
yeah.
plot and such like, and I proof. But I think I'm a really
Okay,
good proofer, because I notice drop words, bad punctuation, repeated phrases, and things like that. And so I can't read. I read on Kindle, and I'm on a
right.
mainstream book, massive, top set, and I'm clicking the page where they've dropped a word or something as a
Yes,
note. It's because I don't
yeah,
think you can
yeah,
turn it
yeah,
off then, can you? But you can still enjoy a damn good
yeah. And I'll
story.
be honest with you, I'm quite forgiving, with punctuation and things like that. And
Mm,
to be fair, I'm not like a master of
oh no,
punctuation, if I'm
no,
honest. But
sorry, no,
if the story's good, I will forgive the odd, typo
yeah.
or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think particularly for self-published, it's really important to get, or at least a proofreader. Um, so I should be sending you my next
It's
book to
I
proofread.
can remember. Yes, please, I will prove it. I've sat at dinner with someone, another reader, and I've said this book. It was awful. It was really badly phrased. There was repeated chunks, and she said, "Oh, that's the best thing I've read this month." So you realise then that we're
Yes,
reading for different reasons, and you
yeah,
can't presume. I think it should stop people getting
yeah,
too precious, as I say, or too snooty, or anything. You cannot dictate how people should
yeah.
read and what people should
Yeah, and
read,
they're in
and you
completely
shouldn't.
different states of mind.
And so it's a
So,
joy.
what they might, if they'd have read your book in
Yeah.
January, they might have had a completely different
Oh,
reaction than if they
Gloria.
read it in, I don't know,
Yeah.
September.
And there are some people I will not read because of perhaps the author behaviour online or
Yes.
such like. Because there's plenty of books out there I can read.
Yeah,
There's not many people that you would
yeah.
overlook
Because you're not
anything else.
investing your money when you buy, well, you're not only investing your money when you buy a book, you're investing time. If somebody's going to take
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 hours to read your
Time.
book, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And your emotions. Do you ever not finish a book nowadays?
Uh, I am
An
actually,
interesting one.
this. So I am reading a book called Gaywick, And well, let
Oh,
me rephrase that.
yes.
I'm trying to read a book called Gaywick. Right now,
Yeah.
it's very rare I don't finish a book. Very rare. I can think of one, but I am ploughing through Gaywick. So Gaywick is the first ever gay gothic romance novel, or so I'm told. It was written in the
Yeah.
80s. And when I picked it up, I thought it was going to be like a really accessible kind of pastiche, but it is written, as you know, like a real turn of the century gothic
Wow.
novel.
Mm.
But I'm finding it quite histrionic, and I'm struggling to keep. I mean, there's only like
Yeah.
four characters, and I still can't keep two of them in my mind, really. I'm about three-quarters of the way through, and I come back to it piecemeal rather than sit and just try and plow through it because I just find it's just too heavy going.
You see, I used to take great pride in never
Yeah,
in
yeah,
always finishing a book. And I think you can give a book a
yes,
chance, and a lot of them will pick up later on. If you Nowadays, life is too short.
exactly.
Life is too short, and there are too many others. If I'm not saying I give them a page
Sure.
and then I give up, but if it's not, yeah, I'm pretty sure
Mm,
now what I like, and if the characters aren't speaking to me, they aren't. I don't really care if a lot of them go off a cliff. Yet you think I'm not engaged with you,
yeah,
or the style is all. I will stop. I will
yeah.
give up. I get quite. You see, partly that would have been
True.
recommended, that book, not necessarily that book, but other books, because they were the first. You use that word, the first in
Yes,
its kind, the first book you
yes.
ever read. When you see the threads on Facebook that say what introduced you to the gay romance genre, they always go back to the same
Okay.
names. And those books were not necessarily
Mm,
good. I mean, a lot of
yeah,
them
yeah.
were, but or they might not stand up now because fiction
Mm,
moves on, language moves on, and it does always make me a little bit cross because there are so many fabulous books since that should be
yeah,
getting credit as well. It's like the top 100 of anything that they
yeah,
publish, isn't
yeah,
it, in magazines and papers? And you think, oh, for goodness sake, you're banging the same old drum.
yeah,
We have moved on. There are a lot of whatever the discipline, huge things have happened that people have created, and it just gets me a little bit cross. Some are, are
yes, yeah,
groundbreaking and marvelous, but you have to read it in the
yeah,
times as well. I mean, like I was saying earlier, that anything would be published
yeah,
in the early days because it was a growing genre that people couldn't get enough of. It would have been a
yeah,
novelty then.
yeah.
It's not
Do you know
now.
what? You just reminded me. There is a book that stands out very clearly as one I didn't finish, and I won't say who the author or the name is, but the reason it stuck out is because it was one of my MA lecturer's books, and
Oh,
it had just come out and it was in hardback, and they were
yeah.
going off and doing the tour, and we got special lectures from them and stuff, and I just couldn't connect with it. It wasn't that it was badly written. I just
And if it
yeah,
doesn't appeal, yeah, if you don't connect, if it doesn't appeal, it is a very
yeah, yeah.
emotional
And to be fair, I only
experience.
bought it,
And you
yeah,
like a book, or
because he was our lecturer. I think if I'd have seen it on the shelf and read the blurb,
you could sign it.
I wouldn't have picked it up. So for me, it
No,
I wouldn't leave a review because it wasn't fair, because I wasn't the audience that was intended for, and
no.
I'm very careful. Um, I don't tend. I definitely would never review someone else's book in our genre. Never. But if it's a self
Well,
help book or something
that's a
like that,
minefield,
I'd
absolute
quite happily do
minefield.
that.
But I mean, how often have friends said, "Oh, you'll love
Yeah,
this. I loved it,"
yeah,
or "You must read it," and then you read it and you think, what are they raving about? Because
yeah,
it's very personal. It's very difficult to step away from that when you're an author, of course, and being reviewed, and someone says this was worst waste of paper this year, and other people will say, "No, I didn't say that about a book once," and other people will say, "I loved it, I loved it." So and I don't know why we gravitate to the bad
yeah,
as opposed to the good. We're not encouraged by the good; we're devastated by the
yes,
bad. So that's another thing that I think I have cultivated a certain distance over the
yeah,
years has
yeah.
been worth it. That I
Well,
don't
I
really
used to
mind.
think,
If you didn't like it, you didn't
yeah,
like it. I know
I used to think
I liked
like
it.
I used to describe particularly on Goodreads, a 1 star review. Well, sorry, a 1 star rating without a review. I used to say it felt like a drive-by shooting.
It
Mm,
is. Well, it is, and that's
yeah,
known for that. That's somebody trying to bring. That's somebody being
yeah,
malicious in most cases. I don't know. Things like Goodreads, they are for the reader. I
yes,
know that's what
yes,
people keep saying, not the author, but it's true. And I've started an account on there in another name just to catalogue what I'm reading because I'm
right,
dreadful at remembering names and titles. And it works
yes,
well for that. I
yeah,
don't rate anything. I'll write a couple of
yeah,
little notes just to
mm,
remind me what it was about. So when I go back, that book, that book I read with that
yes,
bloke
yes,
in that town, yeah, I can now find it again. Um, so I think, and also 1 star to someone, yeah, it could be malicious, but then somebody else does mean 1 star to them means I'm not going to bother
yeah,
going
yeah.
back and
And I
rereading.
think I don't have an issue with bad
Or,
reviews. I
you
think I could probably quote them to you because those are the ones that stick with me. Yeah,
says nobody ever.
but what I like about reviews, we've got really far off gay robots, haven't we? But yeah,
We have,
but
haven't we?
what
But we'll
I
come back. We'll come back.
what I do like about a 1 star review is I feel the reviews, are, as you say, are for other readers. So if somebody's able to articulate why they don't like that book, somebody could read that review and say, "Well, actually, I do like that in a book. I do like forced proximity.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
read that book."
But I don't think it is for other readers. I think it is for the reader
Okay.
who does the review. Some people show off. Some people like, I think,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
consider themselves reviewers. Goodreads is not reviews, it's
Yeah.
opinions, personal opinions on the book you read.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, even Amazon reviews. And of course, we crave reviews because it
Yeah.
is all about
And
getting
it's about
noticed.
validation as well.
It is external validation because you are putting something out there that you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
be received well on whatever your
Absolutely.
criteria
So
are.
listen, back to you. We've been talking for a long
Yes,
time, and to be
have we gone on
fair, I
too
could
much?
talk
Or
to
do
you
you
for
want to?
another 3 hours.
Yeah, sorry. You might you might have to strongly edit
But I am interested
censor
in
this.
I'll put all your social links in the show notes, and now I'm going to have to do
Oh yes,
double the
thank you.
work
Yeah.
because of Stella Shaw.
Oh no. Well, you can just do a couple for Stella. I can
Okay,
send them through
but
later. But yeah,
okay, so um, basically, my sort of final. I've got two final questions. Okay, the first one is, what advice would you give somebody who's thinking about getting into the romance or gay romance genre in the genre?
read
Yeah,
in the genre. Read it because it's a huge. It's not just one genre.
yeah,
Like we're
yeah, yeah.
circling right back to where we were, weren't we, from the beginning? There are all types. So I genuinely would say read as much as you can, which you can in KU without paying extra money, and decide what one
Yeah.
floats your boat and that you would like to write in. And then, if you read enough of those, if you funnel it down, you get a feel
Okay.
for what's selling. Look at the charts. Now, if it's just about the joy, yes, I would just stop at that stage and write what you enjoyed. But
Yes.
if you want to sell, then go on and look at charts and
Okay.
such like. So yeah, I think that's the only read, and I would possibly suggest joining a couple of the
Okay.
larger Facebook groups that concentrate entirely on that genre. There's one called Rex recommendations. So that's will show what's going through the market and what sorts
Okay.
of things people are putting out and what's there
Yeah. And there's
because
so
there's
many
tons
subcategories
there.
and stuff, and we haven't got time to go into them all because there are. I mean, I'm shocked how many
No,
subcategories
God
there
no.
are, and I don't know if there are even those categories in heterosexual romance. Um,
Actually, possibly
yeah.
not.
I mean, obviously
No.
you've got your
Yeah, I would say
yeah,
keep an open
yeah,
mind.
yeah.
Keep
I
an
mean,
open
obviously you've
mind
got
when you're
your
looking through because it does go from the
well, yeah.
sublime
But I
to the
guess we've got
ridiculous.
category
So
romance in Mills and Boone and Harlequin and stuff, haven't we? So my Yeah.
I
So
think
my
there's.
final question is: you've talked a little bit about Stella Shaw's project that you're working on. What is Clare London working on?
I'm still bringing
Right.
out some of those old ones, republishing some of the stuff that I got back. On a new front, I've really only just done a few short stories
Mm.
over the last year or so. I always love to write something for Christmas.
Yes.
I just love Christmas, really. So I always try and write a sort of really cheeky, funny thing,
Yeah.
long, short story. Like Goldilocks and the Bear was my absolute favourite, but I've done a couple since. What else am I doing? I haven't got any large projects because, as I said to someone the other day, I've only got
Yes.
one pair of hands to type. So I'm giving Stella
Okay.
2021. But I am keeping the backlist moving
Yeah.
on Clare London. I would love to return to the
Really,
Accidental
I
Baker
would love to read more.
series now. I might do that. Yeah, I don't know really. So she's just trying to keep out there. I'm working the romancing series because people really seem
Good.
to like that, and it's my most
Yeah.
recent series. So I'm talking about that in various places because I love romantic comedy. You know, it's not Five Weddings and a Funeral, it's Four
Oh,
Palaces and a
perfect.
Farm, which is my romancing
Okay.
the Rough Diamonds. So it's about a royal gay wedding and jewels. What could be more fabulous?
Sign me up.
So yeah, that's about all really. I mean, I was on the team of running UK Meet, which is a meet where fans of fiction, LGBTQ fiction, can get together, authors and readers. But that's been
Right.
postponed for
Okay.
another year
Yeah.
because of COVID, so that probably won't happen before next year. So otherwise, as an author in that, just keeping up with
Yeah.
community, supporting friends, doing
Okay.
a bit of
So I'll make sure
editing,
people have got the links in the show
living.
notes, but it's fair to say that 2021 is all about Stella.
It's Stella's
it
year,
will
I
be.
think.
It will
Really,
be.
yeah. We are
Yes.
moving towards
It will be
the
a
Christmas
Stella year.
special. We are going through the steps.
I'm just thinking
So I
about
hope
if it's
so.
a
Just
if
put
it's
that
a Rent Boy
on the
series,
end.
something you'd like rented for Christmas. But
Yeah.
yay!
Oh,
See,
that's nice.
so
Yes. Actually, that gives me an idea for the title for the Christmas
rented
special.
baubles.
I'm just writing that down. So I'm just writing that down. So that really, yes,
Okay,
is all I'm doing. That's
fantastic.
all I'm
Well,
doing. I mean, I write as well. I'm one of those part-time writers. I'm not a
okay,
full-timer. I don't think I want to be.
yeah,
I don't
it's
think I'd
quite
be
a
any good
different
at
shift,
full-time
I'll
writing.
tell you. But
What do you think? Is it? Yeah. Do you find you have difficulty disciplining
no,
yourself and
no, I'm up at
sit
six
down?
thirty. I'm at my desk
Good.
for 8, and I write for 4 hours, and I keep a list. So if I get up and make a cup of tea and it takes 10 minutes, I track to the 5 minutes. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very disciplined. But as I say, with the book coaching and stuff, it I just need to kind of find that balance. But yeah, I mean, I write as much as I can, and I get a bit antsy. I took a week off about a month ago, and it was the worst week I've had because I just wanted to get back into the study and write.
Wow.
So
Yeah. I think you've
yeah,
got to follow that because there will be days or periods when you
yeah,
can't. So I think
yeah,
you've got to follow. If you want to, you should
yes,
do something. I've got a friend who set herself a target of 600 words a day.
yeah,
You know, that's sort
yeah,
of just
yeah.
just
I think
enough
yeah, it's yeah. I
to
always say
have
to my
clocked in.
clients, it's about forward momentum. So if you can't send me 10 pages a week, at least send me three or something, just so they know that they're always writing forward. But yeah, it's
I think that's the important thing is to
yes,
keep going, not to beat yourself up if you don't make it. But I think there is a certain
yes,
muscle
yes,
memory
yeah. I
element
absolutely agree.
of sitting and typing. Does mean you
Yeah,
never have any free time because I'm working and then I'm also writing. And my husband said the other day, he said, and now you've got a third job
yeah,
promoting,
yeah,
doing the marketing. And I said, yeah. So they're always extra jobs. You don't give
yeah,
anything up to
yeah.
do these extra things.
Okay, well,
So,
listen, we need to
but
wrap it up.
keep
But we're
us
going to get
alive.
together. We're going to have a coffee, I'm going to do a little bit of
Right.
work with you on
We are
some
definitely.
story development, and I can't wait to do that. I've always wanted to work with you.
Mhm.
So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, glory.
No,
I
it
hope it
won't.
doesn't let you down. It's an old book. It's an old book. An old
Perfect.
melodramatic book.
Lovely. Okay, so thank you, Claire. Thank you for giving up so much of your time today. I
No, thank
really,
you.
really appreciate it. As I say, I'll go and change out of this pink shirt because
Yeah,
it's
it's been
very hot today.
smashing. Yeah. It's a veritable pride. And yeah, it's been
All
lovely
right.
talking to you. It's been
All
great.
right.
I'll
Take
go off.
care.